All right. Welcome to episode 66 of the Jake Blanchard podcast. We're honored to have both Fellowship Brand and Stream to See as sponsors on the podcast. You can go into the notes in the details section for the podcast to see special offers. And remember that code JBP at checkout gets you 10% off both of those fine brands. My guest today is Dr. Jon Harmon. He's the founder of the Clear Mind Center of Idaho. And this place is super interesting. He's working with folks with all sorts of neurological issues. He's providing a variety of services, some which can be considered brain training, which I'm excited to learn more about today. For some additional info, Dr. Harmon practiced chiropractic medicine for over 20 years. He transitioned his focus to neurofeedback, where he is currently board certified. Neurofeedback is an interesting area of medicine. It really focuses on the timing and activation patterns within the brain. And I can't wait to learn more. This is a topic that I'm fascinated with. And if you've been paying attention to the last few guests, many of them have been folks who specialize in different ways to approach pain, trauma, mental optimization in some way, shape, or form. So excited to have Dr. Harmon on the podcast. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction.
Yeah, of course. Hey, let's get centered here. You're obviously in Idaho now. Is that where you're originally from?
No, but I consider myself to be an Idahoan now. I've lived here since 1990, but I grew up in Fresno, California.
Okay. And then what got you involved with chiropractic medicine? Why did you choose that as a field to study?
Well, my family, my mom would take us to the chiropractor for different things. She started when I was 2 years old. She said I was in so much pain for some reason. I must have fallen or something. And she took me to a bunch of different doctors and nobody could figure it out. And the neighbor said, "Hey, why don't you just take him to our chiropractor?" And she explains it. He put me up on the table, whack, whack on my sacroiliac joints, and away I went. And then I've been adjusted for 65 years now. And something happened when I was in junior high. My brother had asthma and my mom was taking him somewhere. And she said, "No," I said, "Where are you going?" She said, "Well, I'm taking Dan to the chiropractor. He has asthma." And when he came back, he didn't have it. So I thought that would be my profession. And that's what I did for all those years until 2015, when I made a transition.
I'm struggling right now because you said that you went to the chiropractor when you were like 2 years old and you've been adjusted for 65 years. You do not look 67 years old, my man. Like if you're watching this on YouTube, just look at the thumbnail to this podcast. I'm sure we'll have a picture of you on the thumbnail. It's preposterous to think that you're 67 years old.
Well, thank you. I'm 67. I just had a birthday 2 weeks ago.
Holy smokes, man. So what was as I pivot back, so you're practicing chiropractic medicine, you said for obviously 20 plus, maybe 30 plus years.
About 22 at that time.
Okay. And then, so what did you like about doing chiropractic medicine, and why were you willing to give that up to go focus on this new area? Or like how interrelated is chiropractic medicine and neurofeedback?
Well, that's actually an interesting story. I think I was known, my practice was called Harmon Spinal and Extremity Solutions, but I also branched out into oxidative medicine. We used to do ultraviolet blood irradiation. I used to do high dose vitamin C IVs and treatment for Lyme disease and other things in addition to the chiropractic. What happened in 2010 started my earth-shattering, it was a series of events that led me to shift my focus. And that was in March of 2010, my 18-year-old niece committed suicide.
Wow.
And then in March of 2011, my oldest daughter's husband was murdered right there in the Walgreens parking lot on Linder and McMillan.
Oh, here in Boise.
Yeah, in Meridian.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was an attorney in town, and he was having an affair with his paralegal, and my daughter suspected it, and sure enough, he was killed by that girl's husband back then. So that was March of 2010, March of 2011, within one day of being exactly on the day. And then the next year, my sister died, and my youngest daughters were saying, "Daddy, everybody's going away." And they had depression and anxiety and insomnia. And we were taking them to a counselor, and they were on prescription drugs. And none of that seemed to be helping very much. And so about 2015, I embarked on a mission to find some things initially to help my own daughters. I thought no family should have to go through this. I mean, it was just these things that happened that caused these shifts, and then they weren't the same. And there's actually a little bit further back that started my interest in this. And that was when I was 24, my oldest sister, who showed no signs of mental illness ever, had 3 babies in 3 years, and something shifted in her brain, and she was never the same. She went from, she was homecoming queen, married the Florida State basketball star, beautiful, beautiful girl. And the doctors could only say, well, something shifted in her brain. And I kept thinking, well, why don't you just switch it back? And then all of this stuff happened to my own family. And that's when I started back in that 2015, 2016 time. And I knew that I needed to get some specialized education. So I went through the certification process to get certified in reading EEGs, electroencephalograms, and then also doing neurofeedback.
Well, and Dr. Harmon, if you don't mind, I want to go back specifically in one. What a tragic tale of events, one after the other. And I appreciate you sharing that to give us some perspective here about what was that catalyst to kind of send you in this direction. I'm really interested in the switch that you just said kind of flipped in your sister. And if there was anything else that you could share that would help us kind of understand what her current state is today, if she's still with us.
Well, she, for all intents and purposes for our family, the Beverly that we knew died in 1978. And she continued on as to us, an imposter for the real Bev. And she passed away in 2012. So
okay.
2010, 2011, 2012 is when this all went down. Excuse me. And she was never the same. Nobody could give us any answers. They she was on prescription drugs. She was in and out of mental hospital, and lived in a group home, passed away as a stranger. It was wow. The oldest in our family. It was, really shaking to the core of our family, unit. And so that made me want to find out, what are those shifts? What caused her brain to do that? And so, metaphorically speaking, I'm flipping Bev's brain back. That's hard to say.
Wow.
That's what I do all day now.
So that's what neurofeedback is, or maybe just kind of give us a working definition then of neurofeedback, the field, what it covers, maybe some of the conditions that you see. Just maybe riff on this a little bit, and we'll see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, I want everybody to imagine that the brain has this bunch of motors in it, like 2,600 different motors, and they all have a dimmer switch. It's a rheostat. It can get more activity, less activity. If it has the normal amount of activity, then whatever that part of the brain processes is functioning at normal levels. If there's not enough, then that would be like, I can't remember stuff. I can't fire up that part to access those memories. Or conversely, if it's too much, let's say, just a simple comparison, both you and I have been blinking this whole time. That's normal.
You just made me really aware of how much I've
been. But if
blinking.
Somebody does this, it's a tick. So there's too much activity in there, and it just keeps firing and firing and firing and firing. That may be something like anxiety. It may be something like angry outbursts. It might be I can't do word retrieval. Well, there's a specific part in the brain where you do word retrieval. Or it might be stuttering. There's too much activity and I get stuck on different things. And we've treated people for all of those things that I'm talking about. So neurofeedback looks at there are several different types. There's operant conditioning neurofeedback. That is operant conditioning. We do the EEG. We see where there's too much activity, where there's not enough activity. This is where we get symptoms. And then it trains the brain by rewarding it for not doing or for doing the appropriate pattern and depriving it when it gets outside of the normal range. That's operant conditioning neurofeedback. And we used to do that here at ClearMind Center. It has a 50-year history of success. But then a newer technology came out that untrains the brainstem from the faulty pattern that it's in, that it's stuck in. And let me just develop that a little bit. What's in the brainstem? Well, the autonomic nervous system is in the brainstem. What's that? Autonomic, think about all the things that all happen automatically in your body. What's your blood calcium level? I don't know. What's your blood pressure? I don't know. Because your body just is supposed to regulate that. But that system is actually two different parts. One is the gas and one is the brakes. When you get in a car, it's good to have an accelerator, but sometimes it's also good to stop. So when you start something in motion, you have to be able to stop it. The fight or flight is called the sympathetic portion of that autonomic nervous system. Fight or flight, it's appropriate to feel anxiety. There's a tiger chasing me. It's appropriate to feel that anxiety if an enemy or if something's coming at you, or you have to run, you have to fight, you have to flee, you have to have adrenaline, increased, stamina and energy. That is the fight or flight. We'll call that the gas. The opposite of that in general is called the parasympathetic, and that is in general the brakes, except in the gut. And it speeds up digestion, but everything else it slows down in general. You have the gas and the brakes. Parasympathetics for resting, digesting, healing, feel good, and sleep. So you cannot be running and be asleep. You can't digest food while you're running. So they work at, for the most part, opposite times. Both of those systems are in the brainstem. The brainstem runs on delta waves. One portion of our delta runs the fight or flight. One portion of our delta fight runs the rest, digest, heal, feel good, sleep. When we have head trauma, emotional trauma, chemical exposure like Lyme disease, mold, mercury, aluminum, all kinds of walking outside, 28,000 different toxins you can encounter or something like that. Any of those cause such a shift and damage to our brainstem that it shifts what portion of that autonomic nervous system we can run. And now we can't fire up the parasympathetic. We're stuck in what's called parasympathetic freeze. Now I got increased heart rate a lot of times. I'm right on the verge of anxiety. I don't digest food well. I'm not sleeping well. I can't shut my dang mind off. It just keeps going and going and going and going. I'm angry. All kinds of things start to happen because that is the autoneuroregulatory part of the brain that sets the regulation for the rest of it. So now, instead of trying to train the brain according to what's too high and too low, now we just untrain the brainstem so that it can then fire up both systems, and now you have the gas and the brakes.
What a wonderful analogy that is. And there's a lot there to unpack.
There's a lot there to unpack. And I've developed a way of explaining it. I hope that, it doesn't get all brain geeky,
No, I'm hoping that you're going to be brain geeky on the podcast for sure. Because again, this is a an area that I'm really interested in. I think the first question that I have here, you mentioned delta waves. So I'm, again, such a bro science guy. Like I look up articles. I have kind of a working knowledge. I've done a few things. Like I've taken a product by a company called On It called Alpha Brain, right? That's supposed to like kind of increase, it's a nootropic. It's supposed to increase some kind of like function in the brain. I listen to those like binaural beats or like music to help. And I'm obsessed with kind of the frequencies. I actually just bought this thing's called a love tuner. It's like at 528 hertz. Some people say it like opens up your heart chakra. And I like to buy stuff like that just to kind of see. But when you're talking about like delta waves and things like that, are we even in the same ballpark that we're talking about with these hertz and frequencies and alpha brains? Or like, what's the difference in what you're talking about and what I'm talking about?
Okay. So there are different frequencies of brain waves. Delta are the slowest. They are 1 to 4 cycles per second. So 1 to 4 times a second, those neurons are firing up. Compare that to the cortex, where you're doing fast processing and calculating math or doing analytical thinking. That's 30 times a second, even more in some people, sometimes 40 or even higher on these really powerful thinkers. So those are beta waves. Those are fast waves. Delta, the brainstem, delta waves are associated with brainstem and sleep. So when the autonomic nervous system is firing, the slower frequency delta runs the fight or flight. The faster, like 3 to 4, runs the parasympathetic. And what happens is when we have those injuries, those traumas, those chemical exposures, it slows the dominant frequency down in delta. The brain responds very similar to if your blood pressure drops, your heart rate has to increase in order to keep the same amount of oxygen in your system. So what happens, the frequency goes slower, but the power goes up. And let me explain that. The power is a measurement of how many cells are firing at one time. We know what normal is. We know what the power of delta should be in any, in the brain. Power is a measurement of how many cells are firing. The more cells that are firing, the more power can be detected on the scalp. With me so far?
I'm tracking.
Okay. So think of that like the electricity coming out of your wall socket. You got 60 hertz, 110 volts, delta waves, 1 to 4 hertz, and let's just call it 11 microvolts.
Okay.
Pretty normal. I've had people come in and their power in delta is like 60 instead of 11 plus or minus 4. So what that causes is a lot of brain fog, because delta is associated with sleep and brainstem function. If you're awake and you've got all of the cells firing at once, you got a lot of brain fog and you feel like, man, I feel sleepier. I feel like I am asleep, or I should be. So you don't want to have that during the day. And
can I stop you there for a second?
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm sitting in front of a computer a lot of the day. I'm a consultant by trade. I do this podcast off the side of my desk, really fun opportunity for me. But what happens is sometimes like I start to get kind of brain foggy and I turn to caffeine like immediately, like, oh, I need caffeine. Hearing what you're saying right now about like the fog is actually an increase of activity. Likely giving myself caffeine is probably going to make it worse.
Well, here's what caffeine does. Caffeine speeds up your beta. And so that's why we feel like we can concentrate better, because we actually get more power in our beta waves. And compared to our delta, it's how one compares to the other, whether or not you feel focused or foggy.
So you might be able to achieve like a short-term balance.
Short-term, Right.
But then, once those betas waves start kind of crashing back down and your delta waves are still firing like crazy because your parasympathetic nervous system isn't engaged in some meaningful way.
It doesn't change anything long-term. And prescription drugs do similar things. Just give you an example. One of the most common prescription drugs for depression, Zoloft, Celexa, they decrease delta, theta, and alpha, but increase beta. So it helps with, firing up the thinking part of the brain. They work without getting too technical, let's just say, well, theta is associated with memory and emotional processing. So if theta is already low on somebody and you take one of those drugs and it drives it lower, these are the people who don't do well. Sorry about your suicidal thoughts. Let's give you something else. If theta is already low, if theta is high and it brings it down to normal, but beta up, that person's going to feel better, but they're not going to know unless they do an EEG before they prescribe something like that. I did a CE course for St. Al's social workers a couple of years ago, and I asked that question: should prescribers do an EEG before they start tweaking around with somebody's brainwaves? And they all was going, "Yeah."
I was just about to ask that.
But nobody does.
That's not a standard protocol for going on antidepressants.
Nope. It's an experiment, and let's see which one you do the best with, and then we'll try a different one, because they each tweak one or more of the brainwaves slightly differently, and they could nail it if they do an EEG first, in my opinion.
Well, and let me ask a really nuanced question here about anxiety or depression specifically. I've heard someone, I wish I could attribute this to the right person, but my perspective on anxiety is it's anticipation for something that's going to happen in the future. And depression tends to be an individual's reflection on the past and how they feel about things that have happened in the past. Does that matter from a brainwave standpoint, or is it kind of in the same bucket of treatment?
I'm going to blow your mind, and you will look at everyone who has anxiety and depression in a totally different way. Beta waves are fast processing waves. The left side of the brain needs more fast processing because it's the analytical side of the brain. It's the gas of the system. That's the left side of the brain. The right side of the brain is our attention center. It's our social engagement center. There are 5 types of attention. Only one of them is on the left side. All 4 of the other ones are on the right side. It's our creativity. It doesn't need fast processing. So beta should have more power on the left in order for the brain to work properly. Alpha should have more power on the right, because that doesn't need fast processing. If you have more power in beta on the right side, you have anxiety, because everything's all ramped up and you don't know why, and your anxiety bucket is full, and all it takes is one little drop and you're in a full-blown panic attack. What we focus on is shifting beta back to where it's supposed to be on the left. Now, conversely, if alpha has more power on the left, I'm really depressed, not sleeping well, and I don't have any motivation because I don't have enough gas on the left side of the brain. That's the go side of the brain. I got slow. It's like the difference between jet fuel and kerosene. The left side needs jet fuel, the right side needs kerosene. If they switch, you have anxiety and depression.
Well, and what happens when people go through both? I mean, I've met.
Yeah, you can have both at the same time.
Yeah, I've met some people that are like emotionally limbic, is kind of what I call it. Is they're just they can't move, and they're also frustrated about the future. They can't make decisions. They're right. Sad all the time. It's like ups and downs and ups and downs.
We see people in here every day like that. Okay. It starts out as anxiety. What happens first is beta shifts to the right, and then you can look at it like, then it chases alpha to the left. But it starts out as anxiety, and it's usually through oxidative stress. It's either emotional, chemical, or head trauma can do that. Sorry about my little table there. So what happens is you get these shifts in the brain, and now one of my favorite things to do is when I have a couple come in, and the wife's got anxiety, and we're talking about beta shifting to the right and all this stuff. And then I'll look at the wife and I said, it probably doesn't work very well when he says, honey, why don't you just calm down? I mean, what's going on? There's nothing going on. You shouldn't have any anxiety. There's nothing wrong. And she's going, no, that doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
Because they don't have control over it. If they had control over it, then they would change it, but they don't. It's just the brain is dysregulated. Now, we used to look at that alpha beta asymmetry, and the operant conditioning neurofeedback worked to switch those back. That all starts in the brainstem to begin with. Now what we do, our microcurrent neurofeedback system is called IASIS, IASIS. It's the Egyptian word for health. IASIS, microcurrent neurofeedback. If you're outside of the state, look that up where you are if you want to find somebody. It sends pulses of normal delta waves, imperceptible, they're microcurrent. Pulses of normal delta waves, all frequencies of delta waves, into your brainstem, and the brain cells start to find resonance with it. And they go, oh yeah, I forgot about the faster ones. And now we're doing both. Now we have both the gas and the brakes. Sometimes it happens so quickly, that somebody doesn't know what to do with it. When you have anxiety for decades and that feel-good part of your brain hasn't been on, I really think this is why people start abusing alcohol and drugs, is because they have a dysregulated brain and they're just trying to feel normal. And hey, when I smoke this marijuana, I feel, normal. I feel that joy that everybody else talks about, but I don't ever feel that. And so when I drink, when I smoke, when I do this, unfortunately, then it leads to addictions, which neurofeedback is also good at fixing, because then it helps bring the brain back into a normal regulation where you can have both systems. You can have the gas and the brakes, and I feel good when I need to. I experience joy and all of those things once that brain is re-regulated.
Well, Dr. Harmon, you touched on anxiety, depression, substance abuse. Like, what other applications, or like what are your patients presenting with that neurofeedback is a candidate for?
Help after a stroke. They got paralysis, tremors, seizures, PTSD. In fact, remind me, I want to tell you about something for veterans and first responders.
Yeah, absolutely.
OCD, ADHD, ADD, all of those, types of things and variations. I can't recall words. I can't recall names. I have the angry outburst. I'm the nicest guy, and all of a sudden something flips, and I'm really mean, and I don't want to be, and those types of things. Bipolar. It's a little more difficult. What that is alpha and beta are switching back and forth. And sometimes they're really, really up, and sometimes they're really, really down. And whatever, dysregulated part of the brain, or whatever part of the brain is dysregulated, will give you a different symptom.
So let me put on the skeptic hat for a second. Okay. From the standpoint of, if I go to a traditional, like, hospital, health system, clinic, those types of things, are they going to treat the neurological disorder in the same way that you are? And why not, if not?
They're starting to. The VA in particular is catching on. They actually, when they saw all of the benefit they were having for their veterans, they actually offered and are paying for and co-sponsoring the study being done at San Diego State University right now. We have a patient who, she's an older lady, she doesn't have any kids, and she saw so much benefit for her own brain that she actually donated some money to us to help veterans, and we have some scholarships for some veterans. So if you know someone who really, really needs our help, please have them reach out to us. We have, out of the 10 spots, I think we have 4 of them that are already filled, but it's for 10 sessions of microcurrent.
Wow.
Neurofeedback. Yeah, she really gets a lot of joy when she comes in here. And then I tell her about, somebody that we're helping, and how it's helping is he can now run through the parking lot. See, this isn't just for, PTSD or things like that. Sometimes chronic pain is just a memory. We actually put the active leads on the body that help restore the natural perception of your body. Some people won't feel grounded. They feel depersonalized. They don't feel in their body, and we'll put the leads on their body, and then they get re into their body, or chronic pain just goes away. It's pretty remarkable, the different things that we can do. You asked about going to traditional. You're going to get, in most cases, I won't say all because I don't know all hospitals, but most of the time you are going to be prescribed a prescription drug.
Yeah.
It's just
that's kind of where I was headed with it, because
Right.
I've gone to and pursued psychiatric counseling in the past. I've never really gone in and spoken with a doctor specifically around anxiety and depression when I've had it in the past. I'm certainly not suffering from it, at least to my knowledge today, though we all could improve in some way, shape, or form. But I've got a lot of friends though at this point in my life who have gone to their doctor, and a lot of friends in my life right now who are currently prescribed some kind of medication in that way.
I think we all do. We all know somebody like that.
Yeah. Okay. So this is an alternative then to the daily dose of essentially the prescription medication. In a simplified version, reduces some frequencies of the brain and increases others. And it's a Band-Aid to maybe the larger problem that you're working on trying to fix, which is, can I teach the brain to make these connections on its own? Can I help the brain relearn some pathways that maybe it's abandoned based on whatever was happening situationally in this person's life, and they kind of unlearned the way that their brain works in homeostasis. And this is kind of opening up the door for them to maybe sustain that change.
That's exactly right. And let's not forget, the brain is fear-based. It's made, or its purpose is to protect us from dangerous, fearful experiences. Excuse me. And when we have one, it connects either a sound or a smell or an emotion, your heart rate. All of these things are wrapped up in this experience, and now it's in there. It's a memory engram. It's a package. It's a package deal, man. When I think about snakes, I go back to when I was 4 years old and that snake reared up and hissed at me. It's all tied in with that. Or I'm in Iraq, the smell of the gunpowder, the smell of death, all of that. Any one of those can trigger the body's response. It's not the memory, it's the body's response to the memory. That's what PTSD is. Now it's all in there, and any one of those can trigger the body's response. Even though I'm not seeing anything, I might just hear a sound. So what this microcurrent neurofeedback does, it brings that up, and so the body can integrate it to the present. It's not helpful anymore. It's not 1984 when I was in the military anymore. This isn't helpful to me, and help integrate those emotions and memories so that it's just a memory now. It's not a body response.
Yeah.
we're not going to erase memories, but your body's response to the memory can be changed.
So what am I doing here? Am I coming in and putting on some magic sunglasses? You putting a cap on my head that shoots electrodes? You plugging me into the matrix with a port drilled in my head? Like how does this work, Dr. Harmon? How does somebody actually get treated?
Let me wheel this table over here. Hold a second.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a little computer system, and I have these leads soaking. I have these leads soaking in solution in between when they're on somebody, but there are these little leads.
Okay.
That look like this, and they go on different parts of the brain depending on what we're working on.
Oh, okay, sure.
You see those?
And how many? Like, is it like 4? Is it 40?
5 leads.
5 leads.
But they are shifted around to different spots for a certain number of what we call exposures. An exposure is usually around 20 to 30 seconds each. And then there's a break, a pause, and then another one. And it depends on what somebody has going on and how hardy or stable or, hardy is a pretty good word, or resilient somebody's nervous system is. They can handle a higher protocol, like a Marine. We have one protocol we only do on Marines or someone addicted to benzos and opioids, because their brain is so resistant. Like a Marine, I had to blow that guy's head off. Hey, what's for lunch? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that are included in that. I mean, that's how they were taught. So the various protocols, from very, very gently saying, hey, wake up, you're doing it wrong, to really shaking the nervous system and sending in pulses to reset the regulation and the firing rate of the brain cells in the brainstem. So these pulses of normal delta waves go in. It's so safe, we can do it on a newborn. I mean, it's like a traumatic birth. You can do it on a newborn. And a person doesn't have to remain still, like the operant conditioning neurofeedback, because the system senses when you're moving or doing something else or talking, and it maintains what's called an offset. So the dose is always the same. That's the neurofeedback part of it. It's getting feedback from your brain and then keeping the dose the same no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
So somebody will come in. We already have their protocol, what parts of the brain we're going to do. All of my staff here are certified. We all went down to California, got certified in doing it. And it happens sometimes really, really quickly. One of the funniest things I've seen in practice, I think, in 32 years now almost, I was doing a protocol on this woman who was in her 80s, and she and her husband were on a mission for their church, and they got called back during COVID. She had a lot of memory issues and anxiety for decades. She hadn't felt good for a long time. So during her first session, when that part of the nervous system turns back on, it's like, whoa, she didn't know what to do with it, but she got this really giddy look on her face, kind of like a cheap date, drunkish look,
Yeah.
And she goes, whoa, I feel really good. I smoked a marijuana once. She didn't say, I smoked marijuana. I smoked a marijuana.
Oh,
but
man,
it probably reminded her when she did that, just trying to feel good before, and it came back on. And I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody tell me, man, it feels like I just smoked a joint.
Yeah.
But it's just that parasympathetic nervous system coming back on.
That's incredible.
Don't know what to do with it.
So excuse, just again, I'm a knuckle dragger, so experienced simpleton here. You're electrocuting people's brains. You also use the word safe. Like help me understand. Like, you're putting these things on my head. I can just, I feel a little warm now, just kind of like thinking about like, hey, I'm just going to walk in here. You're going to stick these things in my head and you're going to shoot electric currents into my brain parts. like, and I'm going to walk out of here and everything's going to, like.
Well, first of all, it's microcurrent. You can't feel it.
Okay.
You can't even feel it in your brain. You put it on, you feel the effect of it sometimes, but you don't actually.
It's not like a TENS unit. Cause I was kind of thinking like a nice little pulsing on the skull. Like,
no, not at all. Those are millivolts. These are this is microcurrent. Gotcha. Millions of a volt.
Okay.
So yeah, you don't feel it. You can feel the effect. Not everybody does the first time. We treat people a lot who have sleep issues, and they'll come in and I'll say, so how did you describe your sleep to me? Oh, I'm sleeping well. I just have to get up to go pee. And I said, well, that means you're not sleeping well. What do you mean? I go to sleep. Well, you're supposed to go through 5 1.5 hour sleep cycles. Your body is supposed to shut down kidney filtration so that you're not making a drop of urine every minute. Because as adults, if your bladder fills up, you're not going to pee the bed, you're going to wake up. So that means you're not sleeping well. And they look at me like, whoa. So that's one of the issues that I had. The first time that I woke up after sleeping all night and I didn't even have to go when I woke up was a big deal for me, because I don't even remember the last time that happened. Where you usually have to get up in the night, maybe 2 times, but then now, not all nights, but some nights I'll sleep all night and not even have to urinate when I get up.
You're the envy of every 67-year-old out there.
I know, man, I'm telling you.
Hey, let me shift the conversation here, because this is a current event, which is COVID. One of the things that I have researched, because I'm always trying to learn more about this thing and different perspectives around it, because there's so much information, misinformation, whatever you want to call it. It's hard to shape a perspective with all the narratives that are out there. But one thing that seems to be consistent is the long COVID symptoms, people experiencing brain fog post having COVID. There's been a couple of studies that have come out. Some show a statistically significant reduction in gray matter in the brain. Another study showing basically on an IQ test that individuals are struggling, and some people 6-9 months continuing on of fog in the brain. Have you seen an uptick of people looking for services because of this cited brain fog, or has it not been something that you've interacted with in that way?
I don't think it's filtered down to us yet.
Okay.
We have such a wide variety of people, from really old, stroke victims, to young kids, but we haven't had any of those long haulers come in here yet.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Just curious. I was just recently reading one of these trials. It's like literally contracting COVID can make you 12 to 15 IQ points stupider. And I was like, whoa, that's wild. And as we talk and you use the word brain fog, imagine just the experience of going through it, as well as having all the societal implications around anxiety and these types of things. Like, right. It wouldn't be too far of a bridge to cross to imagine that we're all dealing with some kind of form of PTSD as a result of the last 18 months, and maybe in some way.
That we've seen a tremendous increase in anxiety.
Really?
Very much so.
Okay. So what's next for you all out there? I mean, are you treating to kind of the full breadth and depth of the different types of techniques, et cetera, that you would use? Are you excited? I mean, this is kind of is this a bleeding edge part of medicine that new templates and frameworks and things are coming out? Like, what excites you about the future of neurofeedback?
I'm very excited about neurofeedback. We did the Operant conditioning, and it took about 40 sessions, so twice a month for 5 months, to get the changes that we're getting in now 10 to 20 sessions with microcurrent neurofeedback. So it's not so much of a huge commitment for the patient, either neither financially nor, time. And we get more to the core of the issue rather than trying to train this down and this up in the brain. Now we just fix it's kind of like looking in a neighborhood and everybody's lights are kind of dim. Should we go to the houses or we should go to the substation? Let's go to the substation. Let's fix that. So let's reboot the firing rate of the brainstem. And then, that's where the autoneuroregulatory part of the brain is anyway. So anything brain, we look at several things here. We do a genetic test that tests to see if they have some variants that would affect, for example, the way the brain detoxes, because when we have those traumas I was talking about, physical trauma, head trauma, chemical trauma, the glymphatic system, which is the lymph system of the brain, gets congested and stuck. And now we have all of these toxins that have built up in the brain. The microcurrent opens up that glymphatic system so things can drain out. If someone has a genetic variant that it prevents their detox pathways from working normally, we want to find that out. Sometimes they have a thing called the MTHFR defect, which, affects things like that, and many other things. So we look at that, and then we also help people with increasing their stem cells, which help them heal in a lot of other ways. One of them is in the brain.
So is that injecting stem cells?
No, it's actually, there's a guy on the level of Tesla who figured out frequencies. He figured out what frequencies the body makes already.
Okay.
Infrared, far infrared, that's why we feel warm. It's infrared heat. And then he figured out how to combine different things in a little patch. It looks like a Band-Aid that form a new type of crystal structure. They're not found in nature, but they create them in the lab. And it's just in a little disposable Band-Aid-like thing. You place it on the body, and it selectively reflects back into your body a very narrow band of your own biophotons that you're making that turns back on your stem cell factory. And I've been using it for about 15 months. And I can tell you, I feel about 15 years younger than I did 15 months ago.
Wow.
Anybody can do that, because when you increase your stem cells, they're the fix-a-crew. They go around and they repair things. My hair used to be a lot more gray, but it's turning brown again. I have friends who are regrowing their hair, but we use them because of the beneficial effect that it has on the brain in what's called coherence. It's a measurement of activity, front, back, side, and side, like we were talking about, anxiety, depression, beta, and alpha. If you go to the man's website who discovered the peptide that gets increased by wearing this patch, you'll understand by the name of the website. It's called Reverse Aging with GHK.com.
Okay.
Reverse Aging with GHK.com. Dr. Lauren Picard discovered the GHK copper peptide. David Schmidt, the founder of the company that makes the patches, discovered a way to elevate the GHK in your body. And that's the chain of events that happens. The GHK gets elevated, and that actually turns back on your stem cell factory. It's like a switch. Peptides are little signaling molecules, and we have a lot of different ones. That GHK is a signaling molecule to make more stem cells.
That's incredible.
So we use those here too. We try to cover lots of bases that are really at the core of things. I don't like to chase symptoms around. I say, let's get to what is the real cause of this. For example, this genetic test we do. I just did one on a woman who's in her 80s. She is on statin drugs, high cholesterol. She's had a hard time regulating her blood pressure. She's had a hard time regulating her weight. She has a genetic variant that affects her ability to regulate her cholesterol, affects her ability to manage her blood pressure, and another one that makes it so she can't manage her weight properly. So once you get those things, what we do is that we look at the test, And then we have a company that formulates one formulation specific for those defects that a person has. So they only make that supplement for that person, and it has everything that supports those pathways. What happens is now those biochemical processes or reactions can go to completion so that they can do what they're designed to do. Short of that, they can't work. It's like A plus B equals C, but if you can't make B, you can't make C. So let's give that person B so they can make C. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And Dr. Harmon, we're coming up on time here. Holy smokes, precision medicine is here, right? I mean, this is what we've been talking about for a long time in the healthcare space, is being able to tailor interventions directly to a patient's needs. It sounds like something that you're working in some cool electricity stuff, and you're working in some cool patching type stuff, and you're helping people. So that's oversimplification, but what an incredible opportunity to chat with you. I'm looking forward to, you're not too far from where I'm at. I'm looking forward to scheduling some time with you. I'd love to try some of this firsthand and really walk through this
absolutely.
process.
Come in, we'll zap you.
Yeah,
we don't zap people. We'll do a session. How's that?
Absolutely, man. And hey, why don't you shout out where folks can find you online, social media, whatever makes most sense.
Well, my email is dr, so doctor, period, initial jharmon@gmail.com, dr.jharmon@gmail.com. Our website is clearmindidaho.com. And our Facebook page is also Clearmind Idaho, Clearmind Center of Idaho, I think, on Facebook page.
Awesome.
And then we're located right in Meridian, 2921 South Meridian Road. I'm located right inside the Karlfeldt Center. It's a Swedish name. It's kind of hard to spell, but it's 2921 South Meridian Road. Our phone number is 208-321-1500. And we have a 15-minute consultation that's at no charge, and we can talk about the issues that somebody has going on and see if we can help them. Anybody who has a veteran, please call me. Those spots are going to fill up quick, and these are a result of the donation from one of our patients.
I love it. And I will include much of that information in the detailed section on the podcast. Again, sir, appreciate you carving out some time and having this conversation with me, and looking forward to following up soon.
Thank you, Jake. It's been really fun. I enjoyed it.
All right, cheers.